Full confession, for episode 3 I'm sitting down with the guy that is largely responsible for the beer that is my go-to beer. Tony Lawrence is his name and RPM is the beer. A beer that, believe it or not, indirectly owes its existence to California.
Well, I showed up in Central Oregon in about '88 chasing the snow from California. And quickly I ended up met some people, got a job at Deschutes Brewery in the kitchen. That was late '88, I believe.
Wow. While working in the kitchen, Tony met Deschutes' first brewer, John Harris, who has his own brewery now in Portland called Ecliptic Brewing.
Him and I became friends very quickly, and I would ask him about beer, he would ask me about snowboards, and before you know it, I left the kitchen, I was washing kegs.
He went on to not only become a brewer at the mighty Deschutes, he eventually went on to co-found his own brewery that most of us know today.
Talk to me a little bit about the early days of Boneyard.
Oh boy, well, it was quite an interesting startup, you know. We didn't have a business plan. If I did, it was in a round folder on a yellow piece of paper.
The name of the brewery rose up from Tony's vast experience in craft brewing. He'd slowly built up a boneyard of equipment to help make his dream come true.
What I was doing previous to Boneyard is I worked around the country and sometimes the world building breweries. And through those adventures, I was able to spot or identify pieces of equipment at various projects I was working on that was something that might be valuable to my dream of opening a brewery. And we usually found a way to get that equipment that was kind of no longer in service at that brewery on a truck or otherwise, ship it back to Bend, hoarded this equipment for a few years until I felt like there was enough to possibly build a brewery from.
So what was it that turned Central Oregon into such a mecca for craft beer?
For whatever reason, the number of breweries, the volume of beer produced, the quality of the beer produced in Central Oregon just spoke waves through the Northwest or the West Coast or even beyond that people needed to come to beautiful Bend and check in on this craft beer thing. It's a no-brainer.
10 years ago when I first moved to Bend, a friend told me the first beer I needed to have was RPM, and he was right. It's an IPA fan's IPA, but one that doesn't melt your face off.
My belief or philosophy in most beers is what is a beer that's interesting if it's not clean and balanced? So you have to make a clean beer, you have to make a balanced beer, and then you layer the interesting on top.
Right, okay.
That philosophy served as the fuel for Boneyard's rapid growth. But what put them over the top? Making lemonade out of lemons during the pandemic.
But when the food and beverage space was shut down during the pandemic, we had to make a pivot. And so we quickly bought a canning line, and we already had distribution relationships. We were the largest brewery in the state that wasn't packaging our beer in a can or a bottle.
And making lemonade also led to a joining together of two local powerhouses.
But that opened up Pandora's box, and we needed some help, so we tapped Deschutes Brewery on the shoulder to see if they'd be willing to give us a hand packaging some beers for us, which eventually led to a partnership. So after 20 years of not being with Deschutes Brewery, I'm back in the old buildings and offices and brew houses that I used to be in the early 2000s.
Boneyard has gone from just kegs to cans to even their own pub serving up Boneyard-style juju, as Tony puts it, on Division Street in Bend.
I'm glad that I get to cheers the guy who makes the beer that's basically been my staple in Central Oregon for 10 years.
Give me a big smile. Thanks, Scott.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Scott Elness, Central Oregon Daily News.